Today we're continuing down the path of step one, planning for your preferred future. Specifically, I'm going to show you a simple way of estimating your retirement expenses. Now, as I stressed in my last video, I always want to be very conservative in our approach. So again, I want to underestimate anything that will work to your advantage and overestimate anything that might work against you. In this case, I'd rather overestimate your expenses than underestimate them. So let's start with your current net income. Think of this as how much money hits your bank account each month. For this example, let's assume that number is $9,000. Now we want to ask, how much of that $9,000 is actually going toward living expenses each month, and how much is usually left over, or how much are we able to save? So in this case, let's assume that you routinely have about $500 left over at the end of the month. So that means $8,500 is what's being spent. Now let's subtract any of those living expenses that will go away when we retire. This could be a mortgage, a car payment, dry cleaning expenses, the cost of commuting back and forth to work, if that's significant, or anything else you can think of that will not be an expense in retirement. And remember, if we're subtracting our mortgage payment, we only want to subtract the principal and interest portion, not the taxes and insurance, because those will continue. Now, if you plan to change your living arrangements, maybe you plan to downsize or move to a new location, then you're going to need to consider how that might affect your current housing expenses too. But for now, and for simplicity's sake, let's assume you're going to stay put and that you'll save approximately $1,000 by having your mortgage paid off. So that drops the $8,500 down to $7,500 of monthly expenses. Now, this is probably also a very good time to say something about mortgages and debt in general, especially when it comes to retirement, when you're no longer getting those regular paychecks from an employer. Since I've already established that retirement is a cash flow problem and not a net worth problem, it follows that, all things being equal, you'll be better off in retirement having lower overhead. And since debt service adds to your overhead, it also follows that reducing or eliminating your debt is key to minimizing your monthly expenses. This also leaves more available cash flow for discretionary spending for fun things, right? Now, I'm not going to get into the bigger picture debate right now on all the pros and cons for paying off or not paying off your mortgage, because that's an entirely another video. But for now, I'll just say that as relates to retirement, I fervently believe in reducing or eliminating your debt prior to retirement. It is going to be very helpful in the long run. Okay. So once we've subtracted any expenses that we think will go away, we want to add any expenses that might be new. Examples might include travel or healthcare costs. Again, you want to be sure that your estimates are generous enough to be realistic. Remember, when in doubt, you want to overestimate your likely expenses. So let's assume you want to add back in some additional funds for lifetime healthcare expenses. Normally, I include two separate amounts. One for Medicare premiums and another for out-of-pocket expenses. But to keep this simple, let's just add back in $1,000 a month total for both. This brings your projected monthly retirement expenses back up to a total of about $8,500 a month. That's $102,000 annually. This is a net after-tax number, remember. So again, to keep things simple, we need to gross it up for taxes, and we'll assume an average 20% tax rate, which gets us up to a gross income needed for retirement of $127,500. To plan for anything less would be somewhat naive. Now remember, this is current dollars, so we're going to grow this by around 2% compounded for your entire life expectancy. Otherwise, your income won't allow you to retain your current standard of living as you age. Now, 2% may not sound like a lot, but when you increase it by 2% each and every year on a compound basis for the next 30 years or so, it has a huge effect and should be more than sufficient to cover your expenses. Now remember, this is just a starting point. You'll eventually look at the finished plan and decide if you think this number is going to work. If not, we'll revisit it along with all of the other variables and make whatever adjustments might be necessary. And I recommend doing that exact same thing every single year. Next time, we're going to introduce the 3 key cash flow concepts that will help you determine exactly where your income should come from each and every year in retirement for the rest of your entire life.